For most of my life, I said yes when I wanted to say no. I gave when I had nothing left to give. I put everyone else's needs before my own and called it love. I called it being a good parent, a good spouse, a good person. But somewhere along the way, I lost myself. I became so focused on keeping everyone else happy that I forgot I was allowed to be happy too. I became so afraid of disappointing people that I disappointed the one person who should have mattered most, myself. Then I turned 60, and something shifted inside me. Maybe it was realizing that my time here is limited. Maybe it was exhaustion from decades of overgiving. Maybe it was finally understanding that people who truly love you do not need you to destroy yourself to prove that love. Whatever the reason, I started setting boundaries, real boundaries, lines I would not cross, demands I would not meet, behaviors I would no longer accept. My family did not like it, not at first. There were arguments, there was guilt, there were accusations that I had changed, that I was being selfish, that I was not the person they used to know. And they were right. I had changed. I was being selfish in the healthiest possible way. I was not the person they used to know, the person who said yes to everything and had nothing left for himself. Today I want to share 5 boundaries I set after 60. 5 decisions that caused conflict at first, but ultimately made my life and my relationships so much better. If you are struggling to set boundaries with your own family, maybe my experience will give you courage. The first boundary I set was stopping my constant availability. For years, I was the person everyone called for everything. Day or night, weekday or weekend, it did not matter. My phone was always on, and I always answered. My adult children would call whenever something went wrong in their lives. Car trouble at midnight, relationship drama at dinner time, work stress during my morning coffee. I was the on-call support system, ready to drop everything at any moment. I told myself this was what good parents do. I told myself they needed me. I told myself I should feel grateful that they still wanted my help. But the truth was different. The constant availability was exhausting me. I never had uninterrupted time for myself. I could never fully relax because I was always waiting for the next crisis call. My own life was constantly being pushed aside for other people's emergencies. So I made a change. I told my family that I would no longer be available around the clock. I would check my phone at certain times during the day, but I would not carry it with me constantly. If something was truly urgent, a genuine emergency, they could reach me, but everyday problems would need to wait until I was available. The reaction was not good. My children felt rejected. They accused me of not caring anymore. One of them said I was abandoning them just when they needed me most. That guilt nearly broke my resolve, but I held firm. And something interesting happened over time. They started solving more problems on their own. Issues that would have resulted in panic calls to me got handled without my involvement. They became more capable, more independent, more resourceful. And our conversations became better. Instead of being the crisis hotline, I became someone they talked to because they wanted to, not just because they needed something. Our relationship improved because it was no longer based on me fixing their problems. Setting this boundary was one of the hardest things I have ever done, but it was also one of the most important. The second boundary I set was around money. For years, I was the family bank. Whenever anyone needed financial help, they came to me, and I always gave. Even when it strained my own budget, even when I suspected the money would not be used wisely, even when the same person asked again and again without ever paying me back. I told myself this was generosity. I told myself family helps family. I told myself I would rather go without than see my children struggle. But there were consequences I did not want to see. My retirement savings were being depleted. My own financial security was at risk. and some family members had started to expect my money rather than appreciate it. The requests became demands. The gratitude disappeared. The turning point came when I realized I was creating dependency, not providing help. My financial support was actually preventing some family members from becoming financially responsible themselves. Why would they learn to budget when I would bail them out? Why would they make hard choices when my wallet was always open? So I set a boundary. I told my family that I would no longer give open-ended financial support. I was happy to help with genuine emergencies, but there would be limits. And I would no longer give money that I suspected would be wasted or that I would need for my own security. This did not go over well. There were accusations that I had become cold, that money was more important to me than family, that I was betraying them by changing the rules. But I held firm, and slowly things changed. The family members who had become dependent started taking more responsibility for their finances. They found solutions I never knew they were capable of finding. They grew in ways they could not have grown, while I was enabling their dependency. And my own financial situation stabilized. I stopped lying awake, worrying about whether I would have enough for my own needs. I stopped feeling resentful about money I had given that was never appreciated. Boundaries around money are some of the hardest to set because money is so loaded with emotion. But they are also some of the most necessary, especially as we age and our ability to earn more decreases. The third boundary I set was around how I allowed people to speak to me. For too long, I accepted disrespectful treatment from family members because I thought keeping peace was more important than my dignity. I let adult children speak to me with irritation and contempt. I endured being interrupted, dismissed, and talked down to. I accepted being the target of frustration when things went wrong in their lives, even when those things had nothing to do with me. I made excuses for this behavior. They were stressed. They did not mean it. That is just how they talk. I did not want to be seen as sensitive or difficult, but every disrespectful interaction chipped away at something inside me. I started dreading conversations with certain family members. I started feeling smaller around them, less confident, less worthy of respect. The boundary I set was simple, but powerful. I told my family that I would no longer continue conversations where I was being treated disrespectfully. If someone raised their voice, I would end the call. If someone spoke to me with contempt, I would walk away. If someone dismissed my feelings or belittled my opinions, I would remove myself from the situation. This boundary was tested almost immediately. During a family gathering, one of my children spoke to me in a way that was clearly disrespectful. In the past, I would have stayed silent and swallowed the hurt. This time, I calmly said that I was not willing to be spoken to that way, and I left the room. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. There was tension for days, but something important had happened. I had shown that my dignity was not negotiable. Over time, the disrespect decreased, not because my family suddenly became different people, but because they learned there were consequences for treating me poorly. When being disrespectful meant I would end the interaction, it became less appealing. I deserve respect. You deserve respect. And we are never too old to demand it. The fourth boundary I set was around my time with grandchildren. Now, before I explain this, let me be clear. I love my grandchildren more than I can express. Spending time with them is one of the great joys of this stage of life. But there is a difference between choosing to spend time with grandchildren and being expected to provide free childcare whenever it is convenient for the parents. For years, I was the default babysitter. Last-minute requests, regular weekly commitments that were assumed rather than asked, changes to my schedule without notice because the parents' plans changed. I felt guilty saying no. I told myself that grandparents should want to be with their grandchildren all the time. I told myself I was being helpful, that this was my contribution to the family. But I was not choosing this time. It was being imposed on me. And that made it feel like obligation rather than joy. I started to resent the very grandchildren I loved because they had become a duty rather than a delight. The boundary I set was that babysitting would happen on my terms, not on demand. I would happily care for my grandchildren when it worked for me, and when I was asked respectfully in advance. But I was not a free, on-call daycare service. The reaction was difficult. My children accused me of not loving my grandchildren enough. They said I was being selfish with my time. They made me feel like a bad grandparent for wanting any boundaries at all. But I held firm, and something wonderful happened. The time I now spend with my grandchildren is fully chosen. I am present with them in a way I could not be when I was exhausted and resentful. They get a better grandparent now because I am giving from abundance rather than depletion. And my children have learned that my time has value, that I am not a resource to be used, but a person to be respected. This lesson will serve them well in how they treat others throughout their lives. The fifth boundary I set was around family events and gatherings. For decades, I attended everything, every birthday party, every holiday dinner, every graduation, every celebration. No matter how tired I was, no matter how far I had to travel, no matter whether I actually wanted to go, I told myself that showing up was what good family members do. I told myself my absence would be noticed and resented. I told myself that being there was more important than how being there made me feel. But some family events had become exhausting rather than enjoyable. Long drives that left me drained. Gatherings where I felt more like an obligation than a wanted guest. Events that triggered family drama and left me stressed for days afterward. I was sacrificing my peace for the appearance of family togetherness. And I realized that appearance was not worth my well-being. The boundary I set was that I would attend family events when I genuinely wanted to and felt capable of attending. But I would no longer force myself to go to everything. I would prioritize my own energy and peace over others' expectations. This was perhaps the most controversial boundary of all. Family members saw my absences as rejection. There were comments about how I used to come to everything, and now I could not be bothered. There was guilt heaped on me for missing events others attended, but I learned to separate guilt from genuine wrongdoing. Feeling guilty does not mean I did something wrong. It just means I am being pressured by others' expectations. The events I do attend now, I attend fully. I am present, engaged, and happy to be there. I no longer sit in corners wishing I was home. I no longer count the hours until I can leave. Quality over quantity. Presence over attendance. These are the principles that now guide my participation in family life. Setting these 5 boundaries was hard. There is no pretending otherwise. There were hurt feelings. There was conflict. There was a period where I questioned whether I had made a terrible mistake. But slowly, things began to change. My family adjusted to the new reality. The resistance faded. They found other solutions to problems they used to bring to me. They treated me with more respect because they knew disrespect had consequences. They appreciated my presence more because my presence was no longer guaranteed. My relationships actually improved. This surprised me most of all. I expected that setting boundaries would damage my family connections. Instead, it made them more honest and more equal. I was no longer a resource to be used, but a person to be valued. My own life blossomed, with time and energy no longer being drained by constant availability and obligation. I had space for things I actually wanted to do. I rediscovered hobbies. I made new friends. I experienced peace I had not felt in decades. And I developed genuine self-respect. This might be the most important change of all. For years, I had taught people how to treat me by accepting whatever treatment they offered. By setting boundaries, I taught them something new, that I mattered, that my needs were valid, that I deserved consideration just as much as anyone else. If you have spent your life without boundaries, the idea of setting them can feel terrifying. You might worry about hurting people, damaging relationships, or being seen as selfish. These fears are normal, but they should not stop you. Let me share some guidance for setting your own boundaries. First, start small. You do not have to set every boundary at once. Pick one area where you feel most drained or disrespected. Set one boundary there. See how it goes. Build confidence before tackling harder areas. Second, be clear and direct. Boundaries only work when they are communicated clearly. Do not hint or hope people figure it out. Tell them directly what you will and will not accept. Third, expect pushback. People who have benefited from your lack of boundaries will not celebrate when you set them. Expect resistance. This does not mean you are wrong. It means they are adjusting to a new reality. Fourth, hold firm but stay kind. Setting boundaries does not require being cruel. You can be gentle in how you communicate while being firm in what you require. Kindness and boundaries are not opposites. Fifth, accept that some relationships may change. Not everyone will accept your new boundaries. Some people only wanted you in their life because you had no boundaries. If they leave when you set them, they were not truly there for you anyway. Sixth, remember why you are doing this. In moments of guilt or doubt, remind yourself why boundaries matter. Your health, your peace, your self-respect, your ability to show up for others without destroying yourself in the process. You are not selfish for having limits. You are human, and you deserve to be treated like you matter, even by the people you love most. I spent most of my life without boundaries. I gave everything to everyone and wondered why I felt empty. I said yes to everything and wondered why I felt resentful. I let people treat me however they wanted and wondered why I felt small. Setting boundaries after 60 changed my life. It was uncomfortable at first, but on the other side of that discomfort was peace, self-respect, and better relationships than I had ever known. If you are living without boundaries, I want you to know that it is never too late to change. You do not have to spend your remaining years as an open door for everyone else's demands. You are allowed to have limits. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to put yourself first. This is not selfish. It is survival. It is wisdom. It is finally treating yourself the way you have always treated others. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this video spoke to you, please share it with someone else who might be struggling to set boundaries. Sometimes knowing we are not alone in our struggles is the encouragement we need. Subscribe if you want more honest conversations about life, family, and finding peace in this chapter. I share what I am learning, what is working, and what I wish I had known sooner. Until next time, take care of yourself, protect your peace, and remember that boundaries are not walls that keep people out. They are fences that keep your garden safe so beautiful things can grow. I will see you in the next one.